Good evening from Vietnam, Dennis. Thanks a lot for spending your time joining our program and sharing your story with our audience, and we really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here, and it's the first time I've been interviewed from such a distance, and I really appreciate that.
And you haven't been to Vietnam, so make sure that the next trip that you travel to this part of the world, you let me know, right? So our family will take you guys around town.
My wife and I travel the world, and we learned a long time ago that there's no better way to visit a country than when you know somebody locally, because it's people like you that will point us in the right direction versus the tourist direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dennis, I really admire the works that you do, the journey that you've been accomplished, and absolutely, there's a lot of amazing things that you are doing at the moment, and that's why I say, okay, I want to invite you to the show. And in our culture, it's a great honor for our audience to have you to introduce a little bit about who you are and the works that you do. Would you please do that for us?
I will be delighted. I'm going to give you the very high level version, and you're welcome to stop me and drill down if you'd like. But yes, let me just give you the backstory of how we got to where we are.
Yep.
And again, I won't go into a lot of detail until I'm done giving you the overview. But I'm originally born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was one of a large family. I graduated high school, and then I spent 30 years in the banking business around the world, international banking. I started a number of businesses. And after many years of doing that, I finally sold everything, settled down here in Tampa Bay, along with my wife, Allie, who I met when I was running one of my businesses in the United Kingdom. And we had enough success when we sold the businesses that we had something that very few people have. We had the ability to sit down and make choices. In other words, how do we want to spend our time? And this goes back about, say, 12 or 13 years ago. Too young to retire. Because we had enough success, we could retire, but we didn't want to. We wanted to say, how do we give back? And a lot of people say that. And when we say it, we didn't mean, how do you write a check? Anybody can make donations to places, but we wanted to give our time, our talent, and our treasure. Those three things. We also wanted to travel, but we wanted to do a different kind of travel. You know, you've been in business. When you're in business, you travel the world like I did, but you know, I've been everywhere once, but I can't tell you much about where I've been because it was business meeting, it was the airport, it was the taxi, it was a meeting room. I've been to South Korea, which is marvelous, but I never saw South Korea. So, and my wife had a similar experience when she was running businesses. So we said, we're going to put a third of our time, at least, we want to travel the world, but we want to do it more intentionally, which means we want to map out the world. And we want to see everywhere else before we see America. Because it's amazing to us how many people have never left this country. It's so big, as you know, because you've lived here once, how big it is. You don't have to leave. You could travel for years. And we said, no, we want to travel the world first because we thought it would be interesting to see America through the lens of other countries. So we started doing that. We have now covered a big part of the world. And so that continues. The second thing we wanted to do was donate our time, our talent, and our resources to nonprofits. So we started volunteering locally here in Tampa Bay. We started delivering meals. I started serving on the boards of directors. We wanted to bring our business experience to nonprofits and help them carry out their mission. We're still doing that today. We deliver the same meals to the same people 12 years later locally in a Meals on Wheels operation. And then the third thing we wanted to do was keep our minds active. You know, some people, they get to a retirement age, which we really weren't there, but you want to keep your mind active somehow. You can play Sudoku, you can do pickleball, you can do crossword puzzles. I said, no, we want to do something different. So we decided we were going to build a website. Now, you're talking to somebody that's no technology background. I've never built a website. So I said, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to start from scratch, and we're going to build something that's going to be focused on what's best for our writers. And that was a little over 11 years ago. We launched what we called BizCatalyst 360, which is a publishing platform. That's just part of 360 Nation. And we decided we would do it for good versus for profit, which means there's no bottom line, there's no profit and loss statement, there's no advertising, there's no promotions, there's no pop-ups. We wanted to take away all the things that would irritate us when we went to a website, we were in business. And we wanted to pass that freedom along to our writers. So I could say to somebody like you, if you were a writer, you can write for us whenever you want about whatever you want, using however many words you want. You can do poetry, you can do articles, you can do videos, you can do podcasts. It's just give you the freedom to write and allow you to do what you want. And we didn't understand back then just how powerful that was. Some people called it a writer's nirvana when they started to understand that they could do whatever they wanted. Well, that was, again, a little over 11 years ago we launched. And I think we've proven that concept would work, because now we went over our 10th anniversary I think it was last September. We've now got, we just crossed over 1,000 writers on 6 continents. We've published almost 30,000 articles. Since then, we've launched into 360 Nation Studios, which is a video channel that we do a lot of work on. We just keep growing, and it all started with an idea of what if we just broke all the rules in the business, but did it for good versus for profit. And that's how we ended up where we are today.
Wow. Thanks a lot for sharing the whole journey with, and in about, like, let's say 4 minutes. All right. So then it's allow us to bring you back in time, and so you and I gonna travel time now. All right.
Okay.
You grew up in Pittsburgh, right?
I did.
Yes, and back when I was young, I wanted to become an astronaut. All right, so wearing astronaut suit and then jumping different planet, but life didn't give me any chance at all. So the young boy Dennis grew up in Pittsburgh. What was your dream about your future and the work that you're gonna contribute to the world then?
Oh, good question. I had no intention. First of all, because of our economic status, we were one of 8 children. My father worked 3 jobs. There was no chance of going to college. So I had to think about what did I want to do without a college education, which was not easy. So what I really wanted to do is I wanted to get into the media business, radio, TV, broadcasting, things like that. I had a real interest in that kind of career. Obviously, that didn't match up against my education. And so I decided the best way to get an education, and frankly, just get out of Pittsburgh, was to join the service. So I joined the Air Force. And I spent 4 years in the Air Force. Literally, I was 17 years old and I left for the Air Force and started traveling the world. And then that's kind of how I got into banking, by accident. It wasn't my career. But as I was getting out of the Air Force, they had a placement program where they would help you get a job. And they got me a job in banking. So I became the accidental banker. And I just decided, if this is what I'm going to do, I'm just going to work hard and work my way up the ranks. And I ended up working all the way to the top of some of the banks around the country. And then again, I started opening businesses. So it was the old days where you could actually work hard, stay focused, and really work your way up the chain. Because I didn't have the education to support my progress, but I had the work ethic to support my progress, and it was noticed.
Well, you get out of the Air Force, and then you got into the banking, stayed there for 30 years, right? And then you grew to the top ladder in the organization, not one but a few of them, right? In the financial services. And tell us how you felt up there, though.
How I felt it there? Well, I felt, if that's your question, I felt like I had earned it, well, I'll say the old-fashioned way, by working hard. It wasn't because I had a college degree that I got the job or got the promotion. It's funny, when I was coming up in the ranks, people said, well, how did you constantly climb the ranks? I said, well, when there was something to be done in a bank and they needed somebody to volunteer to go travel to here or travel to there, I was
Mm.
always the guy that raised their hand. I said, I'll go. Now, it
Oh.
may have been a very difficult trip. It may have been to a very challenging area across the country. But it was noticed that I was the guy that would always jump off the cliff and take the risk and take the assignment.
Mm.
And part of that was work ethic. Part of that was me feeling like I had to stick out from the crowd a little bit.
Mm.
And it got to the point in my career, Hal, where I realized, I had a chance while I was in banking to go to college
Mm.
because they would have helped me pay for it.
Oh.
But it got to that point where I had to make a decision. Which is more important now? Is it the education or is it the execution?
Oh.
And I decided then that, yeah, I can go get my degree, but I'm at the point now where I could go farther and go faster by just continuing to do what I did. And that's just work hard.
Oh.
Uh, and that's what got me to the top of the banking channels. And I don't know that you can do that today because there seems to be such an emphasis on just having the right college degree to just get an interview
Mm.
versus, work your way out. But I was blessed that I got into the industry when you could still, work your way to the top.
Mm. Mm. And what happened when you decided to leave all the comfortability behind, start your own journey, your own company, though?
Well, I got to the point after a little over 30 years in banking where, you get to the top levels of some of these companies and I don't know, politics and bureaucracy start to get in the way of making sense. And, they kind of hold you back from doing what you would really like to do because you've got to please too many parties. And there was a friend of mine that was here in Tampa Bay back then, and he had started a mortgage business. And he kept saying to me, he said, you really ought to get out of banking and come work with me. And I said, nah, someday that will happen, but I wasn't done yet.
No.
About 5 years after the conversation, I called him one day and said, I'm ready.
Oh.
So I literally put in my resignation and I moved to Florida. I didn't have a job, but we had an idea of something we wanted to do and start a mortgage business. This is back in the early 90s.
Mm.
So we launched this mortgage company here in Florida, a very small company. And because of good timing and because of where the mortgage market was and because of where the financial market was, we grew to be the third largest in America.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of doing something that wasn't, I'm sorry, it was the entrepreneurial spirit coming out. Now, I was using all the lessons I learned in banking, so I had the skills to do it, but we were also able to manage it like a people business. So we grew fast, we grew large, we didn't allow for all the politics and the bureaucracy.
Mm.
We expanded from the USA up to Canada, then we expanded over to the United Kingdom, we went over to Australia, and that's how I began to do all this international stuff.
Mm.
Long story short, a few years later, we were acquired by Citigroup,
Ah.
and they pretty much bought the operation, except for the British operation that I had, and I ended up selling that to Barclays Bank over there in England, and their only condition of buying it was that I had to move there and run it for them. So I said, why not? I've never lived in another country. I've got nothing going on here in Tampa. So I moved there, ran that company, eventually sold that. Somewhere along the line, I met my wife, and that's where we connected us between us moving back here, having sold our businesses. And then that's when we had the choices that I talked about earlier.
So how did you know after 5 years after your conversation with your friend in Tampa, and then you say that you call him and you say you're ready. How did you know that you're ready back then? What
I
signs saw
think
you?
I think what happened, that's a great question. I think I had just been in one too many meetings, and in banking, everybody wanted to meet all the time, and I'm a real fan of that old quote that says, "One can either meet or one can work. One cannot do both." And I was just so tired of that level of bureaucracy, and it was just wearing me down. And I'd climbed the mountain of banking, and there was really nothing else that interested me. I wasn't really enjoying it. Now, remember, I never wanted to be a banker. I just became good at it, but it wasn't my passion. And that intersected with the bureaucracy, and that intersected with I'll call it the allure of doing something on my own. Even though it was with a friend, we were still on our own. Scary, because you're jumping off a cliff and you don't know if it's going to work. But I always had the confidence of saying, I've worked this hard. If I work hard doing that, it's probably going to work. So it did, and I was very fortunate. I learned a lot of lessons from that.
Wow.
So let me summarize it by saying, over the years, and this really includes what we're doing today under 360 Nation, I went from having an occupation to having an occupation.
Occupation to occupation. Wow. So, what is the 360 Nation all about? Would you share with us that?
Yes, it's three things. It's it's more than three things, but if you wanted to divide it up and say, well, what's it? There's the publishing division, which is BizCatalyst 360. There's 360 Nation Studios, which is where we produce feature-length videos, and they're all tied into for good type topics. And then there is our nonprofit area, which we actually have a separate website. It's called Good Works 360. And that kind of grew out of our interest, as I said earlier, of being very involved in nonprofits. What we decided to do after working with nonprofits for years, we decided to take our for good approach to life and apply it to nonprofits. And here's what I mean by that. I got to the point about 4 or 5 years ago, I said to my wife, we've got such a great nonprofit community here in Tampa Bay. You can get donations, you can get corporate sponsorships. But what if you're sitting in Mumbai, India? You can't get that kind of access, or somewhere out in the Midwest of America, So I said, I want to be able to take the talent we've got and the other technology, and I want to be able to help nonprofits beyond Tampa Bay. The end result is we launched Good Works 360, and the thinking behind that was this. I wanted to be able to say to any good nonprofit, and I really mean the word good, any good nonprofit anywhere in the world, if you need help, we will help you virtually and there will never be a charge. What we did is we went out to our massive network of people, a lot of top tier business people, and said, look, we're launching this consulting thing. It's going to be a foundation. It's going to be called Good Work 360. We are only going to deal with good nonprofits, and we're never going to charge them for what we do. What we need are people that are willing to donate their time. We now have over 4 dozen people that have volunteered over the years, and they have virtually every skill set you would imagine that a small business would need. Sales, marketing, web development, operations, human resources, social media, because a nonprofit really is a small business if you think about it. And so we launched with the idea that if you needed help there in Vietnam, and you were running a nonprofit, we could help you, but it would be virtually, by Zoom, by Microsoft Teams, by Skype, by text, by email. And we've now been doing that for years. So we've got the publishing division, we've got the studios, and we've got the nonprofit, all of them that have come together under the same ethos. And as you know, the ethos is rediscovering humanity. And every piece of that touches humanity in some fashion, starting with the fact that everything we do is for good. There's just no charge.
Dennis, I'm really admire that idea and then the execution that you put on place and make it happen. I want to bring you back to the stage where to the point where you like founding the 360 Nation, because that's where everything started, right? All the three other like business started within that realm, right? So what happened inside of you and your head that make you want to rediscovering humanity and put the company, put the organization name 360 Nation though?
Wow, that's a tough one. I need to think about that for just a minute. I mean, I just felt, or my wife and I felt, I don't want to take full credit. In order to invent all this, before we did anything, I told you we were going to make some choices. So rather than just jump into something, we ultimately decided we're going to do a website, we're going to travel, we're going to do nonprofits. We took a lot of long walks, and we really talked about what was going on in the world. And this is years before the pandemic. This was in probably a quieter time, for lack of a better term. And we just felt like, we were kind of in a moment of history where the choices that were being made everywhere would have a ripple effect for generations to come. I mean, no matter who, you could be a friend, you could be a teacher, you could be a leader, you could be in business. And we just felt like we were in a unique position to help people discover a better version of themselves and maybe pass that along to others. And back then, we felt the best way to do that in our capacity, other than volunteering with nonprofits, was to give more people a voice. And the voice would come through their writing. And it was just a theory at the time. But I had a real appreciation for the written word. Not that I've ever been a writer, but I've always appreciated good writing. So we felt that if we could put ourselves in a position of influence, and the best way to influence back then and probably today is through social media with the right messages. So we just kind of put all that together and said, let's have a reason for why we're doing this. And the reason was, maybe it's preserving humanity, maybe it's rediscovering humanity, because, there is so much negative noise out there today, much more so than we had 10 years ago when we launched this thing. And so we felt there's so much negative noise. If we could compete with that with some positive noise through writing, through videos, through other things, and create what we call positive ripples of change. And I don't mean changing the world. Obviously, we can't do that individually. But if you and I are talking, or I'm speaking to somebody else, or they're reading one of our articles, and the light bulb goes off, and they learn something positive from that, they're probably going to take that with them and share that with somebody else. And that's what I mean by the positive ripples of change. And we didn't realize how important that was back then. But then when we got into the pandemic and just what I'll call a much uglier world right now than we've seen in years, between the war going on, between politics, between police issues, between racial issues, that need and the desire for people to rediscover humanity has just exploded. We've had people coming to us saying, how can we help? 10 years ago, it was us going to people saying, we need your help.
Wow. Wow. I really want to say, I want to congratulate you on the 10th anniversary and look back at all the achievements. It was amazing, right? 30,000 articles, 1,000 people joining the platform as a writers across 6 continents. And now, because of you and Ali has a purpose, a beautiful purpose to help people to create something positively and create something that significantly for humanity and in your own way. And now you see people start to follow, start to become a part of the force. So where do you see 360 nations heading into the future?
I don't have a good answer for that. A lot of people ask about that. In fact, the first question they have is, well, what's your business plan? What's your end game? Says we don't have one. We don't know where it's going to take us. And I'm happy to say that because we've talked about it internally here a lot as we continue to grow, and our growth and our success. Now, success is typically measured by a bottom line. As you know, we don't have one. So we can only talk about success in terms of what we see, and that is this amazing, growing, what we call conscious community of people that have kind of joined the journey to rediscover humanity, and we don't know where that's going to take us. Everything I've talked about, whether it be the nonprofit thing, whether it be the studios that we launched, every change we've made and every new thing we've launched has come through just discussions with people where we said, wow, that's a great idea. Now, we didn't sit down and do a business plan. We just said, we're going to do it because we know how to do it. We now have the talent we didn't have 10 years ago. We were teaching ourselves, how to build a website and all that. And people said, well, where do some of your ideas come from? And I said, well, after 10 years of doing what we do, now I just tilt my head to the side and see what falls out. And there's a quote out there that I always resonate to when we start talking about, people say, isn't it scary? Because you don't know what's going to happen next year. And I forget who said this, but the quote goes like this: faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. Another way of saying that, it's scary sometimes. We've launched some things when we didn't even know how it was going to work. We figured it out afterwards, but we had the confidence that we're surrounded by such a wonderful community that if we needed help in trying to figure something else, somebody would step up for us. Now that just gives us the opportunity to just keep seeing what happened. And so I don't have a clear answer. I really don't know, and I'm glad I don't know, because if I did know, then it would all be planned, and I think we'd start looking like other people. We're just doing what everybody's doing. Well, we do what other people are not doing.
And then sometimes, like 2 days ago, I had another expert joining my show. His name is Les Evans. Les Evans, yes. And he said that his philosophy is having passion is good, but then, and a lot of people go work because of their passions. But then there also another thing that in life is called the path, right? And the path is what something that is already there, and you keep going, and you have the hunch that is leading you to somewhere, and you keep doing that, keep going for that, and as long as you keep work hard, like you say, and then you have the right thing, the things that with the good purpose, then the good result will come, and that is so definitely. And to me, I like the idea of go with the flow. Sometimes, it's a joy in exploring and renewing everything that along the way that we do. It's a fine-tune process. Is something that exciting. It makes us young always, right?
Very good. Well, yeah.
I have two last questions for you for these sessions, because your work involves a lot of ideations, a lot of talk to a lot of amazing people, and a lot of people who think well. My wife and I are in the quest to help people to improve their ability to think, Dennis, because we believe that our ability to think is diminishing, not increasing. So every chance we can talk to people like you, we will ask this question: how have you been helping yourself to expand the ability to think?
I'll tell you, great question again. That kind of leads to a different question that we were asked recently, and I think it intersects with that. People said to me recently, I was on a podcast interview recently, and they said to me, what's been the single biggest, what we call aha moment? In other words, in the 10 years, something happened that caused you to pivot that you weren't expecting. And, I didn't know it was happening until recently when I was thinking about it. And here it is. For the first 7.5 years of doing all this, we were doing everything I just told you. And we're doing we're just growing and we're getting more writers. But the movie The Wizard of Oz?
Yes.
Where Dorothy and her friends, they go into that big city of Oz, and they go into that big castle or whatever it was, and they end up discovering this man behind the curtain that's pulling all these strings. So there really is no Oz; it's just a man pulling the strings. Well, in many respects, I was just the man pulling the strings, but nobody knew who I was. 2.5 years ago, and this happened to be, just as the pandemic was starting, by pure coincidence, this wasn't timed because of the pandemic, we decided we would do something that we had never done, and that was to launch a weekly Zoom meeting, and it was going to be called the Friendship Bench. And the idea was to invite people, many of whom we know, many of whom we didn't know, around the world, to say, look, every week for 1 hour, we're going to get together on what we call the Friendship Bench. You can come from anywhere in the world, and it's going to be a safe, non-judgmental space where you can just come and we're just going to talk about different things. We didn't understand how we were going to do that, except we knew we were going to do it. We launched it, and there's some background on why we call it the Friendship Bench, but that would be for another discussion. But the point is, we wanted to create this space. Again, a pure coincidence, we launched it on April Fool's Day 2 years ago. So it was the intersection of April Fool's Day and the pandemic. Here we go. And here it is, 2.5 years later, and this thing is just thriving. But this goes back to your question and probably my aha moment and the pivot. It forced me to do something like come out from behind the curtain. And suddenly I was more visible, but I was more vulnerable. People understood who I was. I wasn't just some guy behind the scenes that they saw on LinkedIn's name. They knew my name, but they didn't know me. And it's 2.5 years later, and it's probably one of the single...
Recording stopped.
Oh.
No.
Your recording just stopped.
No worry, continue, because I have another recording, yes.
Okay, it was one of the single best decisions we ever made, and we had no idea how powerful it was to come out from behind the curtain and put ourselves in that room with people and get to know them and them get to know us. Over time, it's grown into this, I talk to people that come to the Friendship Bench. We probably average 20 to 25 people every Thursday. In fact, we've got one today. I've talked to people saying, why do you come here? You know, there's a million Zoom meetings out there. And they said, because ours is different. I said, what do you mean it's different? That we actually do, everybody uses that safe space. It actually is a safe space. And just like the website and everything, there are no guidelines. There are no rules. There are no agendas. It's just good people. It's like you and I getting together in a local restaurant and having a chat with, 20 other people. And you just let the chat go and see where it hangs. Now, we always bring a topic in, like a question for the group. And then we step back, and we've learned that the best thing you can do is step back like you do. Ask the question, step back, and just listen. And maybe probe a little further. Well, it's allowed people to share parts of their stories that they've never been able to share before. So many of these people, when I say, why do you show up? They said, this used to be kind of a thing I would go to now and then. Now it's part of my schedule. It's like a business meeting. I will not miss that because that is my me time every week to just exhale. Even if I don't feel like talking, I know I can just sit there, learn a few things, and leave.